Greetings everybody, Rhadamant here. Thank you for tuning in to Songs of Syx, Episode 2, Tilling the Soil for Grain. So much like the warehouse, the shrine has a sphere of influence. So as you can see, this shaded area. This is an important concept that I didn't really understand early on, which is the service it provides is not just the area. If people have to walk a very long time to the shrine, it actually isn't really providing a good service. So if we take a look at the Cretonians' religious services, shrine access is a really important one, as well as quality. So this shrine is only a level 0 shrine. It goes up to level 2. So having shrines close to where people live and work and of higher quality increase their fulfillment. With that said, it doesn't need to be perfect. Trying to fulfill everything up to 100% is rather unrealistic, I think. You're not going to have a perfect utopia that if it was easy to make a perfect utopia, it would not be a particularly compelling game. Alright, and we're getting the well built. I would have preferred to build the well first, given that we're in the summer, but that's fine. The well's gonna get built before a heat wave, which is important. So they're building the second longhouse, and then there's the well. So I am not going to be planning on building much of anything else for a bit, so that my odd jobs can just forage the hell out of everything on year 1. Because I only have a month of food. One thing I can do is to hunt a few of the onks. And you can see a hunter coming down here to do it. One of the odd jobbers. And he's going to chase the onks around and get it hunted. There it goes. There's 1. There's 2, there's 3, and I have a 4th up here too. And that will supply us with a little bit of meat and leather in order to carry us over until the foraging is done. So then they pull the corpses into the warehouse, butcher it within the warehouse, turn the corpses into meat and leather, and then subsequently store it. Okay, we have almost finished the second longhouse construction. And over here you'll see the spoil rate for meat is 50% per year. So it's not... certain things are really good to store for lean years. One of the things that will happen in this game is you'll have droughts, which will ruin your crop yields. And they're hard to combat. And things like grain will store very well, where you'll only lose 12.5% of your grain per year that you don't use. So stockpiling a lot of grain, or a lot of, like, let's say, mushrooms, for drought years is really useful, because things like bread or fruit spoil a lot faster. Actually, fruit's not that much faster, but like vegetables, mushrooms, and grain last a bit longer in storage than like meat or fish. So meat and fish, won't help you during super lean times. Not usually. Alright, we are still pretty early summer. If you mouse over this, you can see the error, which is its edible vegetation must be ripe, which is in late summer. And that's true of all this forageable stuff. That's true of the apples that are down here, late summer. True of the mushrooms, late summer. And the vegetables, again, late summer. So there's really not much to do. I'm going to queue up some trees to be cut down, but as soon as the stuff that is going to be foraged is ripe, I'm going to cancel all other jobs and have all the odd jobbers, all 9 of them, go bum rush the foraging. Where's my delivery man? Probably sleeping. I'm just curious why that meat hasn't been put away. Yeah, oh, he's sleeping. That's fair. Oh, there he is. Now he's putting the cotton away and the meat. Or not. He left again. You generally don't play at a super granular level. I'm just interested to see him. Oh, there he goes. And now as he puts the meat away, as you can see, my months of food are increasing. Up to 8. So immediate risk of starvation has been effectively negated. We'll just cut down some more trees as we wait for things to be forageable. Is there anything I didn't forage? I don't need the opiates. I got the mushrooms. I got the grain. Apples. Did I do the cotton? I didn't do the cotton. We'll get the cotton as well. So I'm just keeping the odd jobbers busy. And we are heading into late summer now, so it should be ready to forage. So once we do the... And I guess I'll update the priority. Forage for necessary crop. Once I have the foraging done, I'll probably start doing grain farms. Because grain requires processing. You don't eat raw grain, you have to bake it into bread. So the grain that we forage is not going to be particularly useful this year until I have a bakery. So I'll start with grain farms and then eventually transition towards fruit orchards. So I'll talk about the things that you can grow. There's cotton farms, or cotton. And the little icons there indicates like the skill that people have in doing it. So the Cretonians are really amazing farmers, so they're really good at like just farming of all types. You have fruit farms. So the difference between fruit farms and fruit orchards is fruit orchards take a few years to start producing, but once they're up and running and producing fruit, they're more fruit per labor than fruit farms. So I almost never do fruit farms because it's just inferior to fruit orchards unless I need fruit all of a sudden, which, you know, you are ideally not trying to have an emergency like that. There's grain farms, herb farms. Herbs are not edible, but they have other uses. Mushroom farms. So mushroom farms are a little bit different, where you have to build a structure to farm the mushrooms in. So mushroom farms early game are a lot more investment than the other types of farms, because if you build a mushroom farm, you're building a building to put the mushrooms in. So it's not something that makes a lot of sense to scale up early game. And then vegetable farms. There we go. So we have our foraging going. So the gray boxes are things that have been foraged, and then the blue stripes are the things that are queued. And they're getting grain. So the other thing that's going to be important here is that our delivery man, and I'm going to ramp up the delivery man priority to 2. I want 2 of them. To be grabbing the things that we're foraging in the field and sticking them into the warehouse. Because if we leave them in the field, they rot a lot faster. Twice as fast. So then here's a delivery man carrying away the grain foraged and sticking it into storage there. And I may need to adjust what's allowed in this warehouse to make space for all the stuff we're getting. So, like, I might reduce meat down 1 and increase grain by 1 or something like that. Just to make sure that the important stuff gets put away. Now, the loyalty and happiness of my people is high enough that I could I do have one immigrant that wants to join. So I'm going to authorize that. So this is our first joiner. And they're going to live in the second longhouse. And immigration works once your population is like 80% happy or greater. And fulfilling their needs is generally the way to do it. Preferentially, I would say fulfill their easiest to fulfill needs. Because certain needs like taverns are much harder to fulfill, whereas markets are easier. So that's what they want, is markets and taverns right now. And I could build the first market. That's not an unreasonable thing, but I'm not going to do that during the forage. I'm going to wait until we're done foraging. So now my odd jobbers are getting the mushrooms. If you zoom out, you can see the little like green or blue dots, depending on the zoom level. So here are the little green dots where they're working. And then they'll get the fruit. But that does mean that they got all the grain that's here. And then the delivery men are pulling it away. Alright, they're done with the mushrooms. They're heading down to this grain here and this fruit down there. So about pathing. Because they're complaining about pathing right now. If you take a look at the overlay of path usage, this is where people have walked. It's like a heat map of where they walk. They're complaining right now that I don't have good pathing, and it's because, like, this isn't a city. This is like a basic starting structure, and a lot of the walking they have done has been out to wild crops, which it doesn't really make sense to have roadways out to the wild crops, because we're not going to be going out there very often. Alright, so we're getting the fruit, and then we'll get the vegetables, and the fruit, and the cotton. Maybe. I'm not sure what kind of time we'll have for all the foraging, but as you can see, my food is really going up. And then it's also important to note that the grain that I have is not being counted towards the food because we don't eat it. So if you take a look at the axis here, this is what they can eat. They can eat bread, eggs, fish, fruit, meat, mushrooms, rations, which is like processed bread, vegetables, and then 2 alcohols, which is piva and sheta, made from grain and made from apples. And you can turn anything off. So like if I don't want them eating the rations, which is something that you typically turn off because your army marches on rations, you can turn the rations off. So I have. And anything that you turn off will then update the month's available food. So if I turn off like meat, you'll see that the food available will adjust to adjust for the lack of meat. But obviously, meat spoils rather quickly. I want them eating meat. Alright, we got all those apples. We're now doing the vegetables down here. And then I hope they get around to doing the fruit over here, because the fruit is, I really want the fruit for the orchards. Well, we have about a year's worth of food. We're not, in any means, food secure, though. That we will need farming for. But that will happen once the foraging time is over. So this is definitely one of those games where, like, in order for big things to happen, you're somewhat incentivized to, like, fast forward time quickly. But in my experience, if you speed the time forward, you're going to be hurtling towards colony collapse faster. So I'm going to play more methodically and carefully than maybe most other people would, because of course I'm broadcasting this and recording this, and I'd like to not make so many easy to avoid mistakes. But it's also to say, when I played as a playtest, I did use a lot of like times 250 speed so that I could figure things out. But it's also a quicker way to make a lot of blunders. Good. So it looks like we're going to get all the fruit that's forageable. Yep. And getting even the cotton. So it looks like the odd jobbers that I had were able to forage everything that was worth foraging, which is fantastic. So I'm going to hire 2 more delivery men. because most of the foraging is already done, and then the important bit is going to be getting that stuff into storage and then using some of that to start farming. So here's a delivery man grabbing vegetables, for instance. I probably don't need ration storage anymore. I'm going to leave this last crate empty because I don't have anything specific that I want to add to it at the moment. So there's still plenty of fruit out here to be claimed. Same with the cotton. Same with the vegetables. Now, there are researches that will allow you to... So there's different ways to haul and move resources in the game. So I've elected to go with the large radius warehouse method. It's not the only method that you can employ. There are haulers. So haulers will... You can build a little structure called a hauler. And you can issue the person working there to just collect things around the map and move it to the hauling spot. And then to set up the warehouse to pull from the hauling spot. So perhaps I'll set up haulers once I start doing things like the ore and the copper. I mean, the ore and the coal or the clay, just to demonstrate it. But usually I go with the warehouse deliveryman method. It's easier. There's also a very good reason for satellite warehouses. Because the travel time between... If you're farming, let's say you're farming grain, you don't want to have your grain farmers have to travel very far to put their grain away. Because then that's wasted time moving around. So having a lot of smaller, like, grain silos that then feed into one larger silo. And that larger silo is the one that happens to be next to the bakery. Is a much better design idea than having one giant warehouse try to collect everything. Because one giant warehouse collecting everything is going to be really inefficient in terms of travel time. Alright, we are now in early autumn. There is barely any of the cotton left to forage. Cotton is not my primary concern for resources. Starvation is the big thing early on, and I have 20 months of food, so feeling pretty good about that. And if you click this icon, you can see where your food is. I have no food income, which would be green here. But this is what my food is. So I have meat, I have fruit, I have mushrooms, I have vegetables. I have got no bread, fish, eggs, or ration packs. Alright, the next priority is going to be set up initial grain farms. So I'm choosing grain first just because I have a ton of grain. I have 144 grain, and I'm not baking with it, which means it is inevitably just going to spoil in my storage over the course of time. So it'd be good to actually use it. So I'm going to pause real quick, and let's take a look at fertility. So I'm going to open up the overlay here to the fertility overlay. And I'm going to set up grain farming in this area here. So as I just explained, I want to set up a bunch of grain farms around like a central collection silo, and then have that silo feed into a bakery that is closer to the population center. And I think I want to set this up as like the early game as looking very agrarian for a role-playing standpoint. It's also worth noting that because I'm building my farms where there is groundwater, which is also called sweet water or fresh water in this game, I don't really need irrigation, as it's already going to be irrigated. So I have 144 grain. So let's set up a grain farm. Oh, let's set up a rectangular grain farm. Do maybe, So if you drag this out, you can see how many farmers it's going to incur. And, I probably want like 2 farmers. So what is this size exactly? If I hit yes. Because the game will usually assign more farmers to an area than it needs. So this was 26 by 11. 24 by 11, 25, or 24 by 10. All right. That's going to be the standard size of my farm, I think. It works for me. So this was a 28 by 10, 280 size plot. Let's pull the road all the way down to it. And then build... I'm going to build roads around each farm plot. Because eventually, the initial roads that you start with give you a 5% speed bonus, but eventually you get up to like a much higher, like 20% speed bonus with research later on. So it's going to be helpful for me to, you know, have a bunch of roads everywhere. And you know what I might do? Actually, I'm going to pause. I'm going to try to design the farms off of the main road. So I'm going to delete jobs here. And do my 10 by 28 off of this main road. So this main road is going to be kind of like a highway. It doesn't need to be wide. Like, there isn't the concept of traffic in this game. You can get away with one wides. But I prefer to have 3 wide for like main roads, just as a design idea. All right, there we go. So now the odd jobbers that are not foraging anything are going to be put to task digging out a grain farm. The other thing that I wanted to do is to have a local warehouse for it. So we'll put a little warehouse like this. Actually, I'm going to turn my crates around to face the road. And this will store grain ready to be shipped towards the city center, where you'll have like bakeries and the like. It also does not hurt to have services like a well and a hearth in and around down here. And it's so that, you know, if your farmers are working and they overheat, they can cool off or warm up, whatever it might be. I don't really like exactly where I put it. There's other necessary services that I haven't touched upon yet. Don't worry, I know. If you're like thinking, where's your janitors? It's like, yeah, I'm putting them in. I don't really need to worry about degradation just yet. Alright, so we have a little plaza to service the farmers. People also like to work where they live and live where they work. So this temple, or this shrine, would definitely supply anyone living around here, but I also might want some houses built for the people working in the farms. Or to put my first, like, housing block near the farms, which I think is maybe a better idea. I have one person starving, but that's just because it was a delivery man that probably went all the way over here to collect the apples. And it was just a lot of labor to collect said apples, and they'll eat. I don't think they'll die. Eat, my friend. Yeah, here he goes. Now, having all this grain is not going to be particularly useful if we aren't actually cooking it. So once I have the grain farm set up, that will be the next task, is to actually do something with the grain. I'm just... I should have done it like that. Whatever. Replacing the walls there so it looks a little nicer. We do have some people that want to immigrate. I'll authorize it. So we're up to 13 now. The first milestone. And maybe I'll change the, change my flag a little bit. The first milestone in terms of level up is a population of 25, which gives you access to the laboratory for research. So that's a good one to aim for early on. Yeah, getting put to work at the ripe old age of 7. Well, they're not humans. So, like, Enki Soul Crusher here is a 5-year-old, but, like, they're a 5-year-old adult. Don't worry, I'm not going to prosecute him or enslave him or banish him or anything like that. So the first winter is a really good time to do larger construction projects because there's not a lot else to do. And I'm also going to spruce up the warehouse to make it look more round. So I'll open up the roundness overlay just so that you know what I'm talking about. So if we take a look at roundness, this warehouse is round, quote unquote, and is creating like roundness around it as a result. Which the Cretonians find is more beautiful. So not every object I'm going to aim for to be round, but I'm going to keep this design concept in mind as I design. There's also light level. No, I don't have access to metals yet, so there are no torches illuminating anything. And then there's harmony. So for Cretonians, harmony, they like harmony, and that means building things like a tree decoration. So I can put like maybe 2 trees on either side of my throne room. I'm not going to do that right now because I think there's better things to do than work towards harmony because my people are happy enough. But that's something to be, a design to consider going forward to make sure that things look harmonious. The average lifespan. So Cretonians do have all the different races will have their own stats. So I'll pause to explain. They have their weight, their stamina, their speed, and this is based upon the race. So for instance, the lifespan of a Cretonian is 75. Of a Dundorian, they're 180. Of the Garthemes, it's 50. And then you go all the way up to Cantors, which live like 1,000. And each race is different from one another. So like, Cretonians here, if you scroll down, you can see that they are pretty highly boosted for farms. So they have like a 40% over average boost towards fruit, grain, cotton, so on and so forth. Those types of farms. Even higher for, you know, they also are good for Oric pastures and Eneldont pastures and so on and so forth. And working towards your species' strength is a very good idea. So for instance, Dundorians aren't good fruit farmers. If you're going to fruit farm, this gets into more like game design. So for me, my goal, of course, is to build a self-reliant colony, which means we do everything in-house. But if you weren't to do that, the smart thing to do would be, if you're a Cretonian, to try to have an agrarian society, export your excess food, and import the things that you are not good at doing. So if I see jewelers, for instance, Cretonians are bad at making bows or making furniture or making jewelry. And it makes more sense in terms of labor pool to export the things you're really good at and import the things you're really bad at. That's just not how I'm going to be playing this time around. It's also true of education. So for instance, humans are way the best at getting educated and being researchers. You can't really import research. So a typical way to play would be to incorporate multiple species into one city. So like, if I was to play meta, I would use my Cretonians to export, you know, the excess food that I have, or cotton that I have, or whatever it might be. And then to import the goods that are hard for me to make, and then to incorporate other species that I get along with. So every species will have, they all have their sort of like likes and dislikes of other species. I forget where you see that. You definitely see that at the opening game. Oh yeah, here it is. So everyone basically likes Cantors, but Cantors aren't really their own species. They're like, they're basically their own little havens, but it's a little complicated. So as you can see, the Cretonians don't mind Dundorians, and they don't mind Talapi. Interestingly enough, the Talapi don't particularly like Cretonians. And they, you know, they're like mixed feelings about humans, but they particularly dislike some of the other races. So if you were to have a multi-race city, you can incorporate the likes and dislikes into it. I was just laughing about the Talapi because they're kind of like forest dryads. They don't really like people. So they like tolerate Cretonians, but like not much. And then you have some like the Garthemi that like hate almost everybody except for, you know, some of the other races. So you can try to incorporate multiple species into one city to make up for the strengths and weaknesses of an individual race. But again, the goal of this is to have to not play meta, but to roleplay and to have a Cretonian self-reliant city. Humans are nasty in the game? Well, they are more likely to commit crimes and go insane. So, yeah, they're a little kooky. You know, what can I say? That's just true. If you look at the properties here, the lawfulness of a Cretonian is like double that of a human. Right? Like, Cretonians are much more lawful than humans that are just like, oh, well, you know, lie, cheat, steal, murder. All the same. Alright, let's get this grain farm going now. So we have the extra hearth, the extra well. Keeping in mind that, like, this structure is completely temporary. We're getting the grain silo. Oops, I didn't mean to click that. And then the grain farm. And that will require a considerable amount of land clearance. Population is now 15. We've gone up 50%. And this is what the times like 250 speed looks like. I'm not intending on playing too much on times 250 speed because the chance of making very critical mistakes very rapidly is quite high. So we're going to get a lot of wood from hacking away at this grain farm. Wood does rot. It rots at 30% per year that is left out. It might make sense for me to create a second warehouse. Of course, the southern door of this warehouse will lead straight into a building, but it's a temporary building. Create a second warehouse up here to house bulk goods that I wouldn't otherwise have space for. And also, in the cutting down of these trees for the grain farm, a lot of that wood will be put into the warehouse construction too. Now, in copying this warehouse, this General Warehouse 1... also, let's reduce the General Warehouse 1's delivery men down to 1. I should have done that long ago, once the foraging collection was done. Because I don't think that there's any more raw goods out here still. Yeah, we had collected everything. Now I have a lot more odd jobbers to do the construction. Extreme temperatures. Temperature has plunged to record lows. Make sure our hearths are stocked with wood. That's a really good point. Wood, especially if you're relying on bakeries, is one of those things, like, if you run out of wood, you're gonna die real fast. Because your hearths will stop working to keep you warm in the winters, and your bakeries, unless your bakeries use charcoal or coal, your bakeries will stop baking, and then you can, if you run out of wood, you find yourself very quickly in a situation where you don't have fuel for your hearths, and you don't have fuel for your bakeries, and you're like, well, I guess I die. So make sure not to run out of wood. It's pretty critical. So right now, it is actually not that cold, but apparently it's going to get cold. And really early on in the game, all of my Cretonians don't have clothing. They're, like, functionally naked. So they're more susceptible to the elements than they would normally be. Once we start turning the cotton into cloth, and then turning the cloth into clothing, or turning the leather into clothing, or however we want to do it, we'll be more temperature resilient. But here's a Cretonian warming up. Rosie Bobbert. No, actually she is wearing clothing. I guess some people have clothing. Not everyone. Like, Davila doesn't. Davila's naked. Don't look. Thank you for tuning in to Songs of Syx, which originally streamed live on Twitch as a marathon November 23rd. If you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments below, but please keep in mind I'm not looking for feedback. This episode was cut from a marathon, and the marathon was streamed one time only, so feedback cannot be incorporated. If you would like to join a live stream of mine, Rhadamant.com has my stream schedule and countdown timers to upcoming streams, and if you would like to join my online gaming community on Discord, Rhadamant.com has a link to it, as does the description of this video. A link to my Patreon page can be found there as well, if that interests you. Thank you so very much for watching. A special thank you to my Patreon patrons, Twitch subscribers, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode or an upcoming stream of another game. Farewell, my fellow Cretonians.